And now to take this ferry disaster a little bit further and look in depth, we're going to speak to Captain Jim Staples, a maritime safety expert in New Orleans. Welcome to the broadcast, Captain Staples.
Hi, Suzanne.
The Philippine ferry capsized minutes after departure, about 200 meters from ashore. What do you think went wrong?
Well, it sounds like they definitely had some problems with some of the cargo that might have been on board as he was turning the vessel outbound. And we have to look at maybe some overcrowding of the vessel, some people that he had more people on board that should have been on board. So we're looking at a couple of things, and also the weather. We need to see what kind of wind conditions, how big were the swells. You know, these type of things we're going to need to be looked at, along with the compliance issues, with the regulations that the Philippine government has set in place for these type of vessels and the training of the crew. You know, it simply gets back to the training, the regulations, and then again the maintenance of the vessel.
You mentioned compliance and regulations. Speaking in broad terms, can you tell us what kind of laws should be in place, for example, that maybe they mirror the ones in the U.S. to keep people safe?
Yeah, well, what we use basically are compliance issues here set by the United States Coast Guard. They're very heavily regulated. We see that the Coast Guard's on board doing inspections all the time. So we need to maybe go into an international standard of regulations for these type of vessels rather than just a compliance issue that's set by certain governments.
What would it take, Captain, I'm sorry, what would it take to impose some international standards? How would that come about?
Well, as we see, we've seen quite a few ferry incidents, and especially in the Philippines, it seems almost yearly that we have another disaster in the Philippines. We just have to look back to as recent as 1987 with the Donna Paz, when they lost over 4,300 people on board that vessel, which goes back to overcrowding, poor maintenance, and again, poor training. So, you know, the International Maritime Organization probably needs to get involved and start to set some of these standards that are globally going to be looked at from different nations of the world.
What kind of laws are in place that prosecute those who jump in these ferries and try to take on the choppy waters in these conditions?
Well, as we see, especially recently in the incidents we've had, you know, with the Costa Concordia, we see that the International Tribunal, the IMO, is going to have certain regulations that are set forth. The Italian government's going to look to see what the captain was doing. And here in the Philippines, it'll be the same thing. It'll probably be a Coast Guard investigation to see if the captain was, number one, properly trained, if he had the proper license to be the captain on that vessel. These vessels that they use in the Philippines are just basically island hoppers that go from island to island. They're about 90 feet in length. They're like a canoe-type dugout without riggers. So they're poorly crafted vessels, and they're mostly wooden. So we need to take a look at that type of regulation too, is the construction of the vessel. And we'll have to go back and even in the China episode, look at the construction of the vessel to see if it was constructed properly, if it's the right type of vessel to be using in that environment.
I think people are educated, Captain Staples, on what the risks are. Is there more that could be done on that front?
Well, always education. Training and education is probably the best thing you can do. Here in the United States, that's exactly what we do. One of the things I do is I'm constantly training up in Staten Island with the Staten Island ferry people on crowd and crisis management and safety.
Captain Staples, thank you for your expertise and your thoughts on this very sad tragedy. We appreciate it.